Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following. Indiana University's Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, presenting Security Matters, with tips for improving online security in 3 minutes or less. Main Source Bank, headquartered in Greensburg, Indiana, offering products and services to fit every stage of life. More information at mainsourcebank.com. Main Source, life needs a great bank. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Smithville Communications, serving Southern Indiana with high-speed fiber gigabit internet. Smithville Fiber Gigabit Technology. Tap the power.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk, it's something we've seen a lot of since State Superintendent Glenda Ritz was elected. She and the state board she chairs at odds.
It's never personal and it's never political. None of us serve here for that reason.
You have no authority.
You have an appeal of your rules.
The latest in the power struggle and how it's affecting the work the board is charged with doing. Plus, the majority of Hoosiers don't have enough money set aside in a savings account to help them in case of an emergency.
People under 40 believe that aliens exist more so than they believe Social Security will be there for them in retirement. So you're on your own. You're in a yo-yo economy.
We'll ask what lessons we learned from the recession and what obstacles are preventing Hoosiers from setting up a rainy day fund. Those stories plus the latest on this week's top headlines right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Hello and welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Sarah Whitmire, in tonight for Joe Wren. Same-sex couples who were wed in Indiana 2 weeks ago say they're disappointed and disgusted by Governor Pence's decision not to recognize their marriages. The governor Wednesday ordered all state agencies to act as if the ban had never been lifted, essentially making them ineligible for any spousal benefits. Gretchen Frazee reports on how Pence's decision further complicates what rights newlywed same-sex couples have.
I now pronounce you married.
Hundreds of couples rushed to county courthouses late last month, minutes after a U.S. District Court judge struck down the state's ban on same-sex marriage.
Jake texted me and said, "Do you want to get married?" And I thought he was joking, and I hadn't heard the news yet.
After receiving marriage licenses, many of those couples married on the spot.
We just got married, which is amazing.
By the power finally, at long last, vested in me in the state of Indiana, I do declare that you are spouses for life.
We're just married all of a sudden. We don't even know what to think.
We have no idea what's next.
I now pronounce you married. Yay!
We're doing something that was illegal 2 hours ago. Like, it's just crazy how times change.
I feel like we're recognized. And I know it just happened a few hours ago and things might change in the next couple days, but I feel like eventually it's going to stay.
Just 2 days after Sarah Perfetti and Abby Henkel's wedding, an appeals court halted all same-sex marriages in the state until the court rules on the appeal. This week, the governor's legal counsel said the state would not recognize the marriages performed during that 2-day window. In a memo, attorney Mark Ahern wrote that the state's marriage law is in full force and effect, and executive branch agencies should act as though the original court ruling was not issued.
I mean, the fact is that it did happen, and we have a marriage certificate, and it has the state seal on it. So whatever they want to say about state laws, we're legally married. And the federal government recognizes that, and our parents recognize that, and I don't really think it should matter to anyone else.
And despite the state's decision, Perfetti says they still plan to have a large wedding reception at her parents' house in Northwest Indiana next month.
Governor Mike Pence told reporters this week that it's his duty to uphold the laws of the state. And since his legal counsel told him the judge's stay left the state marriage law intact, the state should not recognize those same-sex marriages. Now, to discuss the important legal consequences that decision has for same-sex couples, we're joined by Steve Standers. Steve is an associate professor with the IU Maurer School of Law. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So if we can just first begin by talking about, in a practical sense, now, what are these same-sex couples ineligible for that they were eligible for prior to this?
Well, the vast majority of rights and responsibilities that go with a marriage license are created under state law, created under Indiana law in this case. So that means that, for example, if a spouse were to pass away, a legal spouse would automatically inherit from the other spouse. If in the absence of a will, for example, that right wouldn't apply. The right to make medical decisions for an incapacitated spouse. There may even be confusion and difficulty if there are children involved about whether or not the parent who thought that they were married is a legal parent, the spouse who thought they were married is a legal parent of the child of the person that they married. So it breeds a lot of confusion potentially.
And then what about on a federal level? Because that's different too, which further complicates it.
That's right. There are also a significant number of responsibilities and benefits that go under federal law with marriage. For example, the ability to inherit your spouse's Social Security pension if you pass away, the right not to have to testify against your spouse in certain kinds of federal court proceedings. For example, there are actually over 1,000 areas of federal law where marriage is implicated. The Obama administration has said that couples like those married in Indiana and Utah and Michigan and other places where we've seen this same issue come up will be considered legally married for purposes of federal law.
So even though they won't be eligible for those state benefits, the federal benefits are still intact.
That's correct. And it points up what I think is an anomaly or a difficulty in the governor's decision. Essentially, the governor has taken the position that these are not valid marriages. That must be the implication of his decision. Well, the federal government thinks they're valid. The Seventh Circuit, the Court of Appeals, when it stayed Judge Young's decision, it didn't say Judge Young was wrong. It just said we shouldn't proceed any further until the Court of Appeals has had a chance to review this question. So I think there's a significant issue about whether the governor is actually on firm legal ground here or not.
And we don't have a lot of time for this question, but I do think all of this begs the question, should we be fighting this? Should the governor and should the attorney general continue to fight this when we see the way the tide is turning nationally? I mean, we saw this in Kentucky after Indiana's. And
well, I think it's quite likely the Supreme Court will have to take up this question in its term that begins in October, and we could possibly have a nationwide resolution to the issue a year from now. But in that year period, there are many of these couples may have things that come up that happen in their lives where marriage and the legal rights of marriage are significant, and they may not want to wait.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And now we go over to Alex Dierkman, who has an update on this week's top stories.
Thank you, Sarah. The state's top transportation priorities include 2 related to I-69. Of 8 priorities, completing I-69 from Evansville to Indianapolis ranks at the top of the list, and constructing an I-69 Ohio River Bridge is number 7. Here's a look at the complete list that was released this week. The Ohio River Bridges project is number 2. That's followed by the Illini Expressway in northwest Indiana. Completing renovations on US 31 from Indianapolis to South Bend, adding lanes to I-65, followed by number 6, adding lanes to I-70, then the I-69 bridge, and finally a commerce connector around Indianapolis. The top 4 projects have been on the state's priority list. A panel Governor Pence assembled added the other projects this week. State officials say they are still deciding how to fund those projects. Terre Haute officials are moving forward on 2 major road construction projects downtown after receiving the go-ahead from the Indiana Department of Transportation. Terre Haute Mayor Duke Bennett says crews are already widening Margaret Avenue between 7th and 14th Streets, which will complete a major part of that thoroughfare.
And then on 3rd Street, we have a beautification project that we've been working on for several years from Poplar up to Cherry. And so what we'll be doing is milling the street down, new sidewalks, new ADA ramps, repaving the street.
Mayor Bennett says the city is also adding landscaping to the middle of the street to improve appearance and to slow traffic for pedestrian crossways. The majority of the work should be complete by winter. The BMV is challenging a court decision that would force it to restart its personalized license plate program. Motorists haven't been able to buy personalized plates in Indiana since last year when a judge ruled the BMV violated the First Amendment rights of some people whose personalized plates had been denied. The judge rewrote some of the guidelines the BMV uses to determine which plates are proper. The judge said the guidelines were being applied at random. For example, the BMV rejected a plate that read Sexy Grandma, but allowed a plate that read Foxy Gma. The BMV maintains it should write its own rules. The agency's director says he wants the Supreme Court's opinion as to whether the program is constitutional before restarting it. Lawmakers are considering their options after police officers in Gary and Indianapolis were shot and killed last weekend. State Senator Jim Merritt says he's going to push for legislation next session that would dramatically increase the penalties for criminals who use guns. Last session, Merritt co-authored a bill that allows prosecutors and judges to add anywhere from 5 to 20 years to a sentence if a gun was used in a kidnapping, to illegally restrain someone, or if the crime resulted in death or serious injury. The legislation Merritt plans to promote next year would make the additional jail time mandatory. Indiana's former state superintendent will pay $5,000 for violating the state's ethics laws. The inspector general determined Bennett improperly used his state office for political activity by storing a list of his campaign donors on his state office computer and keeping his campaign schedule on his government calendar. But during a hearing Thursday, Bennett was cleared of more serious charges that he and his staff manipulated the state's A to F grading formula for schools to benefit Crystal House Academy, a charter school founded by Crystal DeHaan, a political supporter of Bennett and many other elected officials. Bennett himself did not attend the hearing, but his attorneys spoke on his behalf.
But he stands by those decisions. He's grateful, again, that the Inspector General found there's nothing wrong. We stand by after months and months of everybody asking the very same questions you've asked before, waiting for someone to take action. Nothing has been done other than IG saying no violations occurred. I think it's over. I think it's over.
The Inspector General says the $5,000 fine Bennett is paying is consistent with similar ethics infractions. A state senator from Columbia City will miss the entire 2015 legislative session while he's deployed in Afghanistan. Jim Banks says he was prepared to resign, but a state law provision lets him take a temporary leave of absence. If reelected, Banks, who is unopposed in this fall's election, would be sworn into office via Skype from Afghanistan. His replacement would then be chosen by a caucus of GOP precinct committeemen. Banks is encouraging his wife, who is a policy analyst, to replace him. Indianapolis Representative Ed Delaney is in as a candidate for Indianapolis mayor. Meanwhile, Democratic Chairman Dan Parker is out. Delaney joins Washington Township trustee Frank Short in a race for the Democratic nomination. Sam Carson, the son of former Congresswoman Julia Carson, is running as an independent. Republican Mayor Greg Ballard hasn't said whether he'll run for a third term. Ballard has a big fundraising head start, though, with $700,000. Delaney, who is unopposed for a fourth term in the House, has $30,000 left over in his House campaign fund, which could provide seed money for a mayoral bid. It was supposed to be a done deal, but a plan to save the historic Wigwam Gym in Anderson from being demolished still isn't settled. The Anderson Community School Corporation was expected to donate the vacant property to the city's redevelopment commission this week, which would have then handed it over to the private company Wigwam Sports and Entertainment. That transfer was contingent on the company raising $600,000 for the building's renovation. A few investors pulled out of the deal in the 11th hour, leaving the group short of its goal. The group has until the beginning of September to raise the money. And one Indiana family made the Forbes list of America's richest families. And Sarah, I know you love a quiz. Can you guess who it was?
I would say probably the Simons, who own the malls, would be my best guess.
It was. They were actually number 39 on the Forbes list, and they own 325 shopping malls and retail strips in America, Europe, and Asia. And their net worth, $6.8 billion.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of money.
It is.
Thank you, Alex.
Yes.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Did the Great Recession change your spending habits? If you're like most Americans, maybe you paid off some debt, but you're still not saving. Ahead, why investors say you're neglecting the most important part of your financial plan. And why the U.S. Secretary of Education says he's never seen dysfunction like Indiana's. Stay with us for more Indiana Newsdesk after this.
Nature takes you places where you've never gone before.
It's watching something that's actually happened.
Nature sure draw me in the story.
Just their power and their grace.
You know, it was just so beautiful to watch them.
The movement and just watching the body and watching the chase.
Like this huge, lush, vibrant watercolor.
Gems.
There was such a shot of underneath watching these elephants swim in this deep water.
I had no idea even they could swim like that.
I saw that one monkey pulling on this one monkey's tail, and the monkey like, man, what you doing? What you doing?
It's like the theater of the wild or something.
7 billion trillion animals living on one planet.
It's like more colorful than than you think life can possibly be.
Somewhere between the mystique and the beauty of it is reason enough to sit down and watch.
That's life, and that's nature.
Welcome back to Indiana News Desk. I'm Sarah Whitmire. A rainy day fund or a savings account is considered by financial consultants to be the most important part of your financial plan. You never know when someone may lose a job, get sick, or faced with some other extraordinary circumstance. But a recent survey shows half of Americans don't have enough in a savings account to cover the minimum recommended 3 months' expenses. And another survey shows Hoosiers save less than 1/3 of the national average. For Jan and Kim Anderson, putting a lot of money into a savings account never seemed possible. Kim works with the Shelby County Highway Department and Jan as a gymnastics coach. They made enough money to pay their bills, put food on the table, and raise a family here in Shelbyville. They didn't have any extra cash, but they were doing okay. Then Kim got sick. He needed a liver transplant.
And this wasn't something that I knew that was in my life plan. It just wasn't. It wasn't there, and I don't think it's in anybody's life plan to go through something like that. It just happens, and you just got to deal with it and do what you can and let them take care of you.
By the time the surgery was over, the medical bills topped $1 million. Insurance covered most of it, and friends and family organized fundraisers to help cut down the cost. But the Andersons were still struggling. Some bills were sent to collectors, so they started paying them off in small increments, $20 one week, $50 the next.
We still make payments. I have to take a blood test every 3 months, so about the time we get caught up, then it's time for another blood test. And the way my deductible is, it takes quite a while to get it paid. So about the time we get caught up, then it's time to start all over. So we just, they made me well to keep working and keep making payments, keep them going.
Half of the population is in the same boat as the Andersons were before they had all the medical expenses. Most Americans struggle to save and have less than 3 months' expenses in a savings account. According to the most recent Bankrate survey, less than a quarter of Americans have enough in a savings account to cover 6 months' expenses, which is traditionally what financial consultants have recommended. The Bankrate survey doesn't break the savings rates down by state, but last month, BMO Harris released survey data that shows Indiana parents save well below the national average. The average savings for Indiana parents is just more than $3,000, compared to almost $10,000 at the national level. And 4 in 10 current parents in Indiana have no savings.
It's discipline. Just like I wanted a Big Mac for lunch, but I had a protein shake. Was the protein shake very good? Probably not, but somehow mentally I convinced myself that that was a good thing to have for lunch. So it takes discipline, and not everyone has it. Not everyone has it, and unfortunately you can't change that. You can just continue to try to educate.
Hayes has been in the financial consulting business for decades. He says it's difficult for people to sort out their priorities, what's most important, paying down debt, saving for your kids' college, preparing for retirement, or starting a rainy day fund.
What gets people very discouraged is when they look at all of these things they should be saving for, and the money runs out before the month does. And where do you apply those funds?
Hayes says the low savings rates cited in the bank's surveys don't include what people are investing in employee-sponsored plans, such as 401ks. And he says a lot of people are doing that, but he says it can't come at the expense of an emergency savings account.
The kids have grown up in a very credit-driven society, so you just put it on the credit card, right, and worry about it later. But the best time to save for that new set of tires is when you just put on the last set of tires on that car. Or when you save for the next roof that might need to be put on your home, it's when you just replace the last roof. That's a mentality that the CODs had. We call them the children of the Depression, and that it did not relate over to the baby boomers. It certainly didn't relate over to the echo boomers, but we're starting to see the younger generation realize that their parents are contracting, they're being more conservative in how they behave financially.
Ryan Stacy is a grant librarian at the Monroe County Library. One part of his job is developing finance education programs for 20 and 30-somethings. He says interest in saving is increasing, but there are barriers that stand in the way of many Hoosiers. One is just not having anything left to save after the bills are paid.
In general, I would say maybe the political climate in Indiana is not conducive to helping the average struggling family as much as they could. Maybe programs, education programs that would help people do that, funding the basic social services that help people get to a place of kind of baseline stability before they can think about how they're going to manage their money, increasing employment opportunities.
Indiana's unemployment rate has been improving gradually. It sits at 5.7%, and more unemployed Hoosiers are actively resuming the job hunt. In May, 2,000 people began looking for work.
You have to have money to be able to manage your money.
Reflecting on the last few years, the Andersons' advice to other people who might find themselves in a similar situation is simple. Try to put some money into a rainy day fund, but also don't forget to have a little fun along the way.
Try to save as much money as you possibly can, and even though you're trying to save that money, don't forget about family time, and it's not all about work.
And all the people we talk to stress the need for personal finance education. How we spend and save is in large part dependent upon our parents because financial literacy often isn't taught in schools. So financial experts say students need to learn about finance early on, so well before they receive their first paycheck, they know what to do with their money. Now, tensions between the State Board of Education and Superintendent Glenda Ritz are reaching a new high. Ritz says the board is trying to undermine her authority, and board members, for their part, are questioning what authority Ritz really has. Rachel Morello from our State Impact Education team is here to talk about this latest power struggle and how it's interfering with the work the state's education leaders are supposed to be doing. Rachel?
Well, infighting is nothing new for the State Board of Education. Board member Gordon Hendry even likened his experience with the group to sitting on a high school student council. The latest arguments stem from questions about whether State Superintendent Glenda Ritz is overstepping her authority as chair of the State Board. And all this is worrying some educators who say the board needs to be focusing on more important issues rather than constantly fighting. Kindergarten teacher Twyla Flint showed up to Wednesday's State Board of Education meeting wearing red for public ed.
Personally, I just want to teach. I just want to teach my children. All of the bickering that takes away from just us wanting to educate the children.
Read it, that you have no authority.
You have an appeal of your rules.
That bickering has become a mainstay at State Board meetings since not long after Ritz was sworn in as superintendent. Ritz chairs the board, which is comprised of Governor Pence and former Governor Mitch Daniels' appointees. This time, tensions flared after board members brought forth two resolutions, one to allow them more involvement in important matters, such as the state's No Child Left Behind waiver, and another to change their own meeting procedures, to give everyone a say in planning and appeals. And, not surprisingly, things got heated.
I make no apologies, Brad Oliver, about not having the final copy to do one final review.
It's never personal and it's never political. None of us serve here for that reason. We are here to do the work of education.
I just simply need to put the question to us.
You have made a contention, Ms. Superintendent, that we have no role with this. While obviously this board shares an educational philosophy, that there are many of us in the state, many of, I think, that 1.3 million who voted for Superintendent Ritz, who do not necessarily share your educational philosophy.
Many constituents, notably teachers, are concerned that all this bickering is getting in the way of policy items that need to be addressed. Indiana created new state academic standards in April, and the Department of Education just released curriculum guides for those standards last month. That only allows teachers a few more weeks before school starts in August to make sure they're on track before students come back.
We need to make sure that we are putting some of our personal feelings to the side, because the board is making decisions based upon an entire state that affects thousands and thousands of children.
Walton says she's concerned she and her staff don't know exactly what direction to go on the new standards and assessments, and she wants the board to provide some clarity.
I think a lot of the airwaves is getting somewhat polluted with, the contention between the two, and that's not the focus, and that's not where it needs to be.
State board member Sarah O'Brien says it's a shame politics has become the focus of not only board meetings, but public discussion as well.
I think it's time for us to get back to business, to kind of be able to put some of this aside and do what we're here to do.
Now, as far as the actual rulings that came out of Wednesday's meetings, the resolution to involve the board more in future decisions around the No Child Left Behind waiver passed, but details on exactly how the board will be involved aren't clear. On the item concerning board procedures, the board moved to create a subcommittee to take a closer look at board rules. Superintendent Ritz will appoint the members of that committee prior to the board's next meeting in August.
All right, thank you. And that is the end of our program, but our work continues online as we cover the news in southern Indiana throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following: Indiana University's Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, presenting Security Matters with tips for improving online security in 3 minutes or less. Main Source Bank, headquartered in Greensburg, Indiana, offering products and services to fit every stage of life. More information at mainsourcebank.com. Main Source, life needs a great bank. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Smithville Communications, serving southern Indiana with high-speed fiber gigabit internet. Smithville Fiber Gigabit Technology. Tap the power.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.